Hi, this is Bill Cadwallader. We're back on the third installment of our three-part videos. So we just got finished with the client and we were selecting what filter is the best for her and her home based on her electrical wiring system as well as how she felt. Fortunately, in this case, she didn't feel any negative or positive results from these filters, so we're going to use just the standard green wave. Now, you can also use the Stetzer filter, which is a good filter, and then if you want a two-pronged similar to the Stetzer, you can use the green wave 2500i 2P. So let me also talk about the numbers that we finally wrote down here. So I have a clipboard, and this is the kitchen. We're at the kitchen at the house, and the very last line is dirty electricity or MEP. We have gram Stetzer units, which is the Stetzer meter, and then we have millivolts, which is the green wave meter. So we're about 2,000 on the gram Stetzer units and 1,967. But let me just show you with just one $29 filter, got it down to $3.99. So that's almost an 80%, more than 80% reduction. And this is like over a 50% reduction with just one filter. So, and we also checked the magnetics to make sure they didn't go up. And when we plugged in 4 filters, we actually got down to the gram Stetzer, got down to 83 and green wave 170. So we need to look at some other outlets there and start to work with those. So I also wanted to mention that we do have a PowerPoint as well up in the student. So we have the other 2 videos and we have the student notes. So this is a detail. The things I talk about, it goes into even more detail on MEP, advanced techniques for reducing MEP and dirty electricity. So what in the kitchen, I just wanted to emphasize that I have a filter here, and when you plug it into one of these outlets, let's say you plug it into this outlet, you need to, when you're doing the kitchen test, you need to plug it into the exact same outlet. The top one could be on a different circuit than the bottom one, so always use the same outlet when you're doing the kitchen test for the client, the 5-minute kitchen test. So, and now we're ready to filter. So this is the third part. How do you filter a house once we've selected the right filter for that client? So what we do is we actually start using, and let me just back up. Most people don't have a complete supply with them of all of these filters, the Stetzer and the 4 green waves. Most people would have a supply maybe of the green wave, maybe a supply of the Stetzer, or maybe the green wave 2-prong. So let's just say she happened to respond the best to this filter right here. It's green wave 1500, but you don't have those filters. You have this filter. So we're going to use this filter as a surrogate because they filter about the same. You know, very close to the Stetzer and all the green waves. So we're going to use this as a surrogate. So what you would come here is you would use your meters and you would plug in a filter here. Let's say we needed to plug in a filter here. And then you say, oh, okay. Then you would put a little dot, get these from an office supply, and then put that little dot there. And that tells you that that needs a filter. Because what we're going to do is we're going to use the surrogate filters to go throughout the house. So we're going to leave this in, then we're going to go throughout the house wherever someone sits, stands, or sleeps, and we'll put more of these filters in, the 2500, but we were saying that she might have reacted better, you know, she felt better with the 1500. So, and you want to leave these filters in because they can have a synergistic approach. So as you put some filters in the kitchen, then they could help the rest of the branch circuit. So you would go all the way through, put little dots up there, and then when you're done, you'd pull out these particular filters, the surrogate filter, because she needs a 1500, and then either, she would need the 1500, and then what she could do is she could buy it herself, and then she would know based on the orange dots where to put these in, because every outlet doesn't need a filter. That's why it's so important to use the meters. And then she would, or you could order those and take them over to her house if you want to. So either way, but that's what I would do. Make sure you leave the surrogate in. So decide what type of supply you have. Maybe get about 20 of those filters. and then I would go through a house. Normally filters in a house, if the plug-in filters, I'm using the plug-in filters, they would take anywhere from 8 to 20 filters normally through a house. A little bit larger, it's going to take a little bit more, but that'll give you a very good start. And always remember, check the magnetic fields before and after. So with a Gauss meter or the NFA 1000. So we're ready to filter, we went through. Now if they happen to have whole house filters at the breaker panel, then you would start those up again, you would plug those in, and then before you use the plug-in filters, because you want the value of those filters going through the entire house. And at the end of the student notes, I show you what happens if you plug in filters at the breaker panel, how well they drop. So again, then I would just make sure you got those in, you're getting the benefit of those. So, and when you filter, make sure you filter where they sit, stand, and sleep. That's very important. So if there's an area of the house, let's say it's a spare bedroom, they never go in, then is it really, if you're on a tighter budget, is it really important to filter that? Also, let's say, as Building Biology says, Institute, we want to turn, if we can, the breakers off where they sleep. So if they turn the breakers off and they're consistent with that, they always turn them off, then you don't necessarily have to filter there. But in that room, where they sleep, they happen to have an office, let's say they use the office, then you would want to filter because they're using that room for an office as well. So just think about that. And our goal always is to get the dirty electricity or the MEP down to 50 or below in non-sleeping areas and below 30 in sleeping areas whenever possible. Now, if someone's electrically hypersensitive, we want to get below 30 throughout the entire house after you've picked the right filter for that person. So now let's talk about, you've gone through the house and you started to filter, but they're just not really getting as low as we want them to get. So we have some techniques for reducing stubborn dirty electricity. It's in the student notes again. And we use a power strip, and we also use a T. But let me use the power strip first. So what we're going to do is we're going to gang up on a outlet. So you'd put in Greenway, they have an outlet at the bottom. You can actually plug a power strip here, and then you can actually put another filter in here. And then what you would do is you would record as you put in the filters, and then you could put in actually a third one. So you find when you have stubborn dirty electricity, you want to find the highest outlet in the house with the highest dirty electricity, and then you want to start on that outlet. So once you get that outlet done, as low as it can go, then you go to another outlet in the room. Now you always want to check with your circuit tester to make sure 2 amber lights are going, and you never want to use an outlet that's not grounded or it's not wired properly. So you never want to do that. And so then what you do is just once you've worked on one outlet, then you would go to another outlet, and then you would find the next room that has the highest dirty electricity and start to work on that and use these type of techniques. Now you can also use a T. So we're trying to gang up more filters in an area. And before I go into that, you never plug one filter into another. So GreenWave has this outlet, you never do that. So never do that. Also, with that, you always want to plug them into another device. But you can use a T like this, where you can plug in one filter here, another filter here, and then literally you could plug in 3 filters if you wanted to similarly. But just check, because they'll have a different effect. Either this will make it lower if you plug in 3 filters, or this way will make it lower. Just check. And I carry normally about 5 of these in a home, because they sometimes need it. And then I carry about 5 of the T's, depending upon what works the best. And that's how. So let's say you've done that. You've gone through the house, and it's just not getting low enough to your standards, what you want to get it to. So at this point, depending upon the client's budget, let's say we would go to the main breaker panel at this point. And there's a couple of options. One option is you put an outlet for leg A and leg B, and you plug 2 of these on leg A, and then you plug 2 of these on leg B. So you'd have 4 outlets right at the breaker, because a lot of dirty electricity and MEP is coming from the neighbors. So that would stop it at the source. In the back of the student handout, what I do is I show you what happens when different filters are plugged in at the actual breaker panel, how much it dropped it. So in one house, in this example, that had very minimal, had no solar, had no pool, had minimal electronics, they started out at about 1400, and then they with just 4 filters plugged in at the breaker panel, it got down to 310. So each of your rooms would start with a little lower. The other thing you can also do is use a whole house filter. So that's the next thing. If for some reason that doesn't reduce it enough, then you would use a whole house filter. So this is the plug-in version of the static. There's a PXDNA, and you'd use 2 of these, and these are about $2.99 a piece. And the static is the hardwired version is about 1100 and up, or 1200. The RxDNA V2X, this is about $850 a piece, and you need 2 of these, so this is about 1700. And then the sine tamer, this is the plug-in version of the sine tamer. This sine tamer this is $575, but if you got the one that you wire in, it's about $1,100 or more, maybe $1,150. So that's what you can do if the two green wave filters or 2 Stetzer filters did not bring it down enough at the breaker panel. But most of the time it will. And these are a couple of other options. Some people like to have a wired in option or something plugged in, a whole house option, so that's great depending upon what your budget is. At this time, I did want to mention that all these filters are UL certified except these 2. These all have UL certified components, but the filter itself, when it's combined together, is not UL certified. So speak to your certified electromagnetic radiation specialist about that, or your electrician, please. So sometimes when you're going through, I just want to mention, we're on the FAQs now. And let me start with the FAQs. So what happens if I plug in a filter, but my magnetic field goes up significantly? So if it does go up significantly, don't use that outlet and just move to another outlet. So, and then what I would do is I would use one of these dots, a different colored dot, maybe the yellow one, and I'd mark that saying there's probably a wiring error. So if you bring an electrician, they can look to correct that wiring error. Another FAQ has to do with what happens if I plug in a filter and the numbers actually on the meters go up. So let's say I plugged in one filter like this, and I plugged in a second filter, and I'm looking at it each time it goes down, but then I plug in a third one and it actually goes up. So if one of these go up, one or both of these go up, you do not want to actually plug in that third filter. So that's very, very important. And so what you would do is you'd unplug that third filter in, or second or fourth, whatever it is, and then you would just go to your next outlet. So whenever you plug in a filter and it goes up, then you go to the next outlet. And also EHS, electrically hypersensitive people. So electrically hypersensitive people normally will react either positive or negative to some of these filters, and also have a neutral response. So it's very, very important to do the kitchen test with an EHS person, but I would recommend the kitchen test on everyone, because you always want to put something in that doesn't hurt the person, that benefits them and drops the MEP or dirty electricity. But it's very, very important. And final thing is neighbors. So in the house that we just looked at, she did not have any solar, had a pool pump, but had no solar, but the solar was about 2 houses away. So the electrical utility grid was pumping a lot of the MEP into her house. So I'll find that often in the Southwest, that neighbors, even if you don't have dirty electricity, even if you don't have solar, even if you don't have a pool, then the neighbors tend to pump it into you. And it's very hard now, because years ago we would say, well, you just start unplugging the electronics that cause the dirty electricity inside your house. Now, when you have all the neighbors pumping it in, then it's very difficult. And in the last page or two, the last page of the student notes, I talk about a house that the neighbors, multiple solar, multiple pools, but this person had like almost zero electronics, no solar, no pool, but yet they had very high numbers above 1,400. So that's the problem nowadays, and that's why we have to filter it in some way. But we want to do the filtering that budget-wise is best for the client, and 100%, before even that, we want to get a filter that they have no response or a positive response. Never, never, never put in a filter that they feel buzzing or they feel some other things when you plug them in. So this ends our third part. You can actually send me an email at bill@stopdirtyelectricity if you have other questions. And you can also text or call me at 702-845-5794. 702-845-5794. And if you didn't get that number, you can just go to Stop Dirty Electricity. So thank you very much. This is the end of video 3. So now we're ready for questions. How can I help you?